All right, so today we're diving into The Psychology of Money by Morgan Housel. And let me tell you, this is not your typical finance book.
Yeah,
It's packed with these fascinating stories
right.
and like these aha moments
Yeah.
that really make you kind of step back and go,
Oh, yeah.
I never thought about it that way
Right.
when it comes to wealth.
Yeah. And it's not, it's not just about like the technical stuff. It's not giving you like stock tips or anything like that.
No, not at all.
It's really about the
It's the
psychology.
psychology behind our money decisions.
That's exactly it. So no matter if you've been investing for years or you're just starting out, I really think there's something in here for everyone.
For sure.
Because Housel, he shares these captivating stories about people like, Ronald Reed.
Right. This guy was a janitor, and he like quietly amassed an $8 million fortune.
Yeah.
And then on the flip side, you have someone like Richard Fuscone, Harvard-educated executive, and he ends up declaring bankruptcy.
Yeah, it makes you wonder, right?
Totally. It really makes you wonder, like, how can two people from such different backgrounds end up with such wildly different financial outcomes?
Well, in these stories, they're more common than you might think, and I think they highlight this really crucial point.
Yeah.
It's not always about, how intelligent you are or like your education, your background even.
Yeah.
A lot of it comes down to temperament. It's about your behavior more than anything else.
That is so interesting because you think about it, and I immediately go to like those stories of lottery winners who end up broke.
Yeah.
It's like you think, oh, if I just had this huge financial windfall, I'd be set for life. But it really comes down to, like you said, how you handle money.
Exactly. It's not about how much you have. It's about how you manage what you have.
Right, right.
And Housel really drives this home that, financial success is so much about things like patience,
Yes.
discipline,
Yeah.
the ability to control your emotions, things that, like, you don't learn in a textbook, you know?
Absolutely not. Oh, that's such a good point. It's like knowing which foods are healthy,
Right, right.
but still reaching for that extra slice of cake. We can have all the knowledge in the world, but if we don't actually act on it consistently,
Yeah,
it's not going to get us very far.
yeah. That's a great analogy. Because, Housel also digs into this idea of how, our upbringing.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, and even like our past experiences with money, like from as far back as childhood, can really shape our financial behaviors today. He talks about this concept of money scripts. Have you heard of that?
I have heard of that. Yeah, it's like these deeply ingrained beliefs and habits
Exactly.
that we've kind of developed around money.
Yeah, it's like, if you grew up with parents who, were always stressed about money,
Yeah.
always arguing about money,
Oh, yeah.
you might develop this like scarcity mindset.
Totally. And you might even, like, you could be successful later on in life, but still kind of like
Right.
cling to those feelings of financial insecurity.
Yeah. Yeah, or imagine like growing up in a family where, money was never really discussed openly.
Oh, yeah, that's a good point.
You might enter adulthood feeling totally unequipped
Oh, for sure.
to manage your finances
Oh.
or even just like talk about them comfortably.
Right, right. It's like we inherit these invisible scripts.
Exactly. They're invisible, but they're so powerful.
Yeah, and they kind of play out in our financial lives, even if we don't realize it.
And we don't, right? We often don't.
Totally.
It's, and so the question then becomes like, well, how do we become aware of those?
Yeah. How do we become aware of those money scripts? Like, where do we even start?
Well, Housel suggests reflecting on your early experiences with money.
Okay.
Think back to your childhood. Did your parents argue about money? Did you get an allowance? How did you learn about saving and spending?
No, that's such a good point. Because I do think our early experiences, they can have this
Huge impact, yeah.
huge impact on how we view and manage money, even if we don't like consciously realize it,
It's true, yeah. It's like learning a language. The way we're exposed to it early on really shapes how we speak and understand it for years to come.
Totally, totally.
And just like learning a new language can open up all these opportunities, right? Understanding those money scripts, it can help us make more conscious and
Yes.
fulfilling financial choices.
I love that.
Oh.
Okay, that was deep. Now let's talk about compounding. This is where things get exciting.
Yeah.
Because Housel, he uses the example of this investor, Jim Simons. And get this, he achieved an average annual return of 66%.
66% annually? That's insane. That's the power of compounding over time, though.
Yeah.
Even if you don't hit those like astronomical numbers,
Yeah.
consistent growth over decades can lead to like extraordinary results.
Absolutely. It's amazing. It's like that old saying, the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The second best time is today.
Right.
Like, even small, consistent investments,
Okay.
they can grow into something incredible, but it takes time.
Absolutely. But what's really interesting is that Housel also highlights how even like incredibly intelligent people, brilliant people, can underestimate the power of compounding.
Really?
He shares this anecdote about Bill Gates, who initially questioned the value of a gigabyte of storage.
Bill Gates, he couldn't foresee the exponential growth of data.
It's a classic example of how linear thinking can really cloud our judgment when it comes to exponential growth.
Wow, that's really interesting. So, what does that mean for, the average person? It's not just about earning those high returns, but having the discipline, like you said earlier,
Yeah.
to start early and let that compounding work its magic over the long term.
Exactly. It's about playing a long game in finance, just like in life.
Yeah.
We're so often focused on that instant gratification
Yeah,
that we miss out on the incredible rewards of patience and persistence.
for sure. For sure. It's like the difference between sprinting and running a marathon. You might get that quick burst of speed with a sprint, but it's that consistent effort over the long haul
Yes.
that gets you to the finish line of a marathon.
And when it comes to your finances, that finish line could be a comfortable retirement. It could be financial freedom. It could be leaving a legacy for future generations, whatever it is for you.
Yeah, absolutely. It's so inspiring to think that, like, even small, consistent actions can lead to such significant outcomes over time.
Absolutely. But I think, on the other side of that, Housel also reminds us that, achieving financial success isn't just about making money.
Right.
It's about keeping it, too.
Oh, yeah. And that's where we get into, like, I feel like the next chapter of our deep dive.
Exactly.
Because that is a whole other challenge. It's like that sinking feeling you get when you realize you spent way too much on takeout last month, Like, making money, okay, that's one thing.
Right.
But actually holding on to it, that's a whole other challenge.
It really is. Housel tells this cautionary tale about Jesse Livermore. This guy was like a Wall Street legend.
Oh, yeah, I've heard of them.
Made and lost fortunes multiple times.
Really?
Oh, yeah. It's a good reminder that even the most skilled investors out there, they can still fall prey to their own emotions, make these costly mistakes.
Oh, absolutely. Because I feel like you get on a winning streak, whether it's investing, even just like playing a card game or something.
Right.
You start feeling invincible, and then suddenly, boom, you're back to square one.
Right.
So how do you develop that, keeping it mentality?
Yeah, that's the million-dollar question, right?
Yeah.
Housel really emphasizes the importance of what he calls a survival mentality in finance.
Okay.
And it's not about, necessarily being all doom and gloom, but it's more about prioritizing avoiding those catastrophic losses over chasing the next big win.
So it's kind of like playing defense instead of always being on offense.
Exactly.
You got to protect what you've earned.
You need a good defense to have a good offense,
Yeah.
right? It's about having that margin of safety, that cushion for when things inevitably go wrong.
And speaking of cushions, this reminds me of what Housel calls a barbell personality in finance.
Yes. Yes.
Which I always thought was so interesting because it's like you're being optimistic about the future, but then also kind of paranoid about what could go wrong.
Right, right. How do those two things even go together?
Exactly.
It seems contradictory.
It does.
But it's really about finding that balance between taking calculated risks,
Right.
but also protecting yourself from the potential downsides.
So you're not being reckless, but you're also not being overly cautious.
Exactly.
No.
Exactly. It's like walking a tightrope.
Ooh, I like that.
You need to be aware of those risks,
Yeah.
but you also need to have the confidence to move forward.
Totally. And a tightrope walker, they use that balance pole, right?
Yes.
To kind of keep you steady.
Exactly. And that barbell personality, it uses that combination of optimism and that paranoia
Yeah.
to navigate the ups and downs of the financial world.
Because it's never a straight line.
Never a straight line.
No.
Wow.
This is making me think back to when we talked about, having room for error,
Yes.
I feel like this barbell personality kind of ties into that.
Absolutely. Because having that room for error is like building those shock absorbers into your financial plan. It allows you to kind of bounce back from those setbacks without completely derailing your overall progress.
So what are some ways, practically, to kind of build in that room for error?
Well, I mean, for starters, having a solid emergency fund, that's crucial.
Yeah, that's like the baseline, right?
It is. It's like having that financial safety net, that can catch you if you experience a sudden job loss or an unexpected expense, something like that.
Right, because life rarely goes according to plan.
Right.
There's always going to be those curveballs.
Always.
And if you're not prepared, I mean, those could really throw you off course.
Oh, absolutely. Another key aspect is, diversifying your investments.
Right, because you don't want to put all your eggs in one basket.
Yeah. Exactly. Instead of doing that, spread that risk, across different asset classes, industries, geographic regions.
So even if one area of your portfolio isn't doing so hot,
Right.
you've got other things to kind of like cushion the blow.
Exactly. And, something that I think people often overlook is having adequate insurance.
Oh, yeah.
Whether it's health insurance, life insurance, disability insurance, all of that, having those safety nets in place can really provide a lot of peace of mind and protect you from some potentially devastating financial setbacks.
That's a really good reminder because insurance is one of those things that we often overlook
Yes.
until we need it, and by then it can be too late.
Exactly. So you're right, we've covered a lot here. From building that margin of safety, diversifying investments, the insurance piece, all of it. It seems like room for error is really about being prepared for the unexpected.
It is.
And that preparedness, that ability to kind of weather the storms, I think that's really what separates those who achieve lasting financial success from those who, who don't.
Yeah, because when the storms come, and they always do,
They always do.
you want to make sure that you can withstand the pressure.
For sure. And you know what? That brings us back to something we talked about earlier.
Gotcha.
Those personal narratives that we all have about money.
Oh, you mean those money scripts that we were talking about?
Exactly. Because those scripts really shape how we perceive risk, how we see reward.
Yeah.
And ultimately what really matters to us financially.
So, like, if you grew up believing money is, like, scarce, it's hard to come by.
Right.
You might be more likely to, like, hoard your savings.
Totally.
Even if it means missing out on potential growth opportunities.
Exactly. Or like say, you witnessed your parents like really struggle with debt growing up.
Yeah.
You might be overly cautious with credit, even if it means, you might miss out on some strategic borrowing opportunities because you're so afraid of that debt.
Right. It's like those scripts are kind of running in the background of our minds. We don't even realize it.
Right.
But they're influencing our financial decisions.
That's exactly it. So I think the key is to become aware of those scripts.
Yeah.
To examine them critically and to ask ourselves, are these beliefs serving me well?
Yeah. Are they still relevant?
Exactly. Are they holding me back?
It's like shining a light on those hidden beliefs and those patterns so we can make more conscious and empowered choices.
Yes, I love that. It's like we're upgrading our operating system.
Yes.
We've got to get rid of those old programs that aren't serving us anymore. And speaking of outdated beliefs, Housel also talks about this idea of financial pessimism. Like, have you noticed how pervasive it is, especially in the media?
Oh my gosh, it's everywhere.
Right? It's everywhere.
It's like every other headline is predicting the next recession or the market's going to crash.
Exactly.
And it can be really overwhelming, especially if you're like new to investing or just trying to like manage your money.
Especially as a beginner, you're just like, oh my gosh, what am I getting myself into?
Exactly. But you know what?
Right.
Here's the thing. The world, it has a long history of defying those gloomy predictions.
That is true.
We have faced countless challenges throughout history, and yet somehow we always seem to find a way forward.
I love that. It's true. It speaks to like our resilience, our ingenuity.
Yeah, our ability to adapt and innovate.
Totally.
So while it's important to be aware of potential risks and challenges,
Yes.
we shouldn't let pessimism paralyze us or prevent us from making those informed financial decisions.
I think a healthy dose of optimism, but it's got to be grounded in like historical context and a belief that, as humans, like we progress.
We figure things out.
We figure it out.
Yeah. And that can be a powerful antidote to like that financial fear-mongering
100%.
that's out there. It's like the difference between seeing the glass half empty versus seeing it half full.
Yeah.
Your perspective really does influence your actions.
It does. Your perspective influences your actions, which ultimately influences your outcome.
Totally.
And that brings us to, I think, one of the most profound concepts in the book.
Okay, what's that?
Which is, you are not a spreadsheet.
Wait, hold on. You are not a spreadsheet. Does that mean we should, like, throw out our budgets?
No.
Ditch our financial plans?
No, it's not about that. It's more about recognizing that we're human beings, right? We're not robots.
Okay.
We're driven by emotions, by our biases. We often make decisions that, like, don't perfectly align with what a spreadsheet might tell us to do.
Totally.
Yeah.
So it's not about abandoning logic or data altogether,
Right.
but it's about acknowledging that there's this, like, human element to finance that
Yes.
can't be ignored.
Exactly. We need to find that balance between being informed by the data,
Yes.
but also being guided by our values,
Okay.
by our intuition, by what feels right.
This is getting really interesting because, I mean, how do you balance those two?
Right.
Like, how do you take the data, but then also factor in the intuition piece? So it's not about abandoning logic and just going with your gut feeling. How do we know when to trust our gut and when to stick to the plan?
Yeah, that's the art of it, right? It's a bit of a dance. You gather the information, you analyze the data, but you have to tune into those like more subtle cues,
Mm-hmm.
your comfort level, your intuition.
So it's like that feeling you get when, like, an investment opportunity sounds too good to be true.
Right?
And maybe it is, even if the numbers, like, look good on paper.
Exactly. You can't ignore those gut feelings altogether.
Right.
Sometimes they are red flags warning you of something.
Right.
Sometimes, though, they might be nudges towards opportunities you might otherwise miss if you just stuck to, pure logic.
Oh, that's a good point. I remember when I first started investing, I was glued to my portfolio, like checking it constantly.
Right.
And, all the expert advice said, like, write out the dips, write out the dips.
Yeah.
But my gut was screaming, sell, sell, sell.
And did you?
I almost did, but then I remembered something Housel said about how these short-term market fluctuations, they're often driven by emotion, not logic.
Right.
So I, like, took a breath, stepped away from the screen for a little bit,
Yeah.
and I stuck to my long-term plan.
And that's a perfect example of that balance we're talking about.
Yeah.
You acknowledged your emotional response, but you didn't let it completely dictate your actions. You trusted the strategy that you had in place.
And it paid off, because those initial dips, they eventually turned into long-term gains. So it was a good lesson, like tuning out the noise and trusting the process.
Exactly. Exactly. And, going back to what we were saying before about it not being one size fits all, it's about finding that approach to money that really aligns with your personality and your values.
Right.
Rather than trying to force yourself into some like rigid, emotionless framework, because that's just not realistic for most people.
Right. Right. It's not about being a robot. It's about figuring out what works for you, even if it's not like the quote-unquote most rational approach on paper.
And, Housel actually gives this really interesting example. He talks about Julius Wagner-Jauregg. This guy won a Nobel Prize for treating syphilis with malaria.
Wait, what? That sounds a little
Yeah,
dangerous.
a little counterintuitive, to say the least.
It was a radical idea at the time.
Yeah.
It went against all the conventional wisdom.
Yeah.
But it worked.
Mm.
And I think the takeaway there is that sometimes those unconventional approaches, they can be real game changers. And that's true in finance, and it's true in life.
Totally. Sometimes you got to break the mold.
Sometimes you got to break the mold. And it leads really to this other, I think, really crucial insight, which is that the quote-unquote best financial strategy, it's often the one that you can actually stick with, the one that resonates with you, the one that helps you sleep well at night.
Right, because what good is like a high return investment? Right.
If you're constantly stressed out about it.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. It's like those crash diets. You might see quick results, but they're not sustainable in the long run, you know?
Exactly. Exactly. You got to find that balance.
Your financial peace of mind.
Yeah.
That's invaluable. It really is.
It's priceless.
It's priceless. It's
Yeah.
about finding that sweet spot between, like, you want growth, of course.
Yeah.
But you also want that security.
Right.
And you need a strategy that you can actually maintain through those inevitable market ups and downs.
For sure. For sure. And that takes us back, I think, to one of the most powerful ideas in the whole book, which is wealth is what you don't see. What did Housel mean by that?
He's talking about that invisible wealth, the financial security, that peace of mind we were just talking about, the freedom to make choices that align with what you actually value.
Yeah.
It's not about like how much money you have in your bank account, but what that bank account allows you to do.
Totally. It's like that saying, money can't buy happiness, but it can buy you freedom.
Yes.
Freedom to pursue your passions, spend time with your loved ones, make a difference in the world.
Mhm.
I mean, that's the kind of wealth that really matters.
100%. And, that freedom, it often starts with making more conscious choices about your spending.
Totally.
Housel talks about how he and his wife, they live a relatively modest lifestyle despite their financial success. They prioritize experiences,
I like that.
relationships over material possessions.
I love that. That's so important these days, especially when, It's so easy to get caught up in that comparison game.
It's so easy.
Like, oh, I need to have the latest gadget or I need a bigger house to feel successful. But true wealth, it's about aligning your spending with your values, not like your ego or keeping up with, whatever everyone else is doing.
100%. It's about recognizing that true fulfillment, it comes from those experiences, those connections, living a life of purpose.
Yes.
Not from accumulating stuff.
Love it, love it, love it. Well, we've covered a lot of ground today, from those money scripts to barbell personalities to like the seductive nature of pessimism. What are some key takeaways that you hope our listeners walk away with today?
I think the biggest one is that financial success, it's a journey. It's not this destination that you arrive at one day and then you're done.
It's a process.
It's a process. It's ongoing.
Yeah.
And so much of it is about understanding your own psychology,
Yeah.
developing those healthy financial habits, and then making choices that truly align with your values and your goals.
Yeah, and don't be afraid to challenge those like conventional ways of thinking.
Yeah.
Like think differently, find what works for you, even if it goes against the grain a little bit.
Yes, 100%. Embrace the power of compounding. Prioritize avoiding those catastrophic losses.
Yes.
And save for a world where curveballs are more common than we expect.
Absolutely, because those curveballs, they will come. And most importantly, I love this one. Remember that wealth is what you don't see.
Yes.
It's about that freedom to live a life that you love,
Yeah.
that's rich in experiences and relationships and purpose. I mean, that's the kind of wealth that really matters at the end of the day.
Well said. Couldn't agree more.
This has been such an incredible deep dive into the psychology of money. For our listeners, if you are looking for a fresh perspective on wealth, success, and just your overall relationship with money, I highly recommend checking out this book.
It's a must-read for anyone who wants to really take control of their finances and create that more fulfilling and meaningful life.
Absolutely. And remember, the most important money decisions you make will be a reflection of your values, not your spreadsheets. Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep diving deep.